Well, Caleb, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and indeed to UFI and the British Hospitality Association for the privilege and the pleasure of having the opportunity to speak to you here this morning in this magnificent city. You did reveal that my native home in the Heath was in Glasgow, and I was a lawyer, so let me start off by telling you a tale from the courts in Glasgow, where I used to spend some time. And there's a chap, we'll call him James MacDonald, who's standing in the Sheriff Court in Glasgow, accused of a relatively minor crime of breach of the peace. And the judge looks down at Mr. MacDonald in the dock and says, "Mr. MacDonald, this is a minor matter for you, but it could have the most serious consequences. Have you no one here to represent you?" And Mr. MacDonald replied to the sheriff saying, "That won't be necessary. The good Lord will be my defender." At which the sheriff looked down the half-moon spectacles with which they're issued on appointment in Scotland and said, "Mr. MacDonald, I strongly urge you to find someone better known locally." So the task I have, that may or may not be true, that story, I'll just give you that as a clue, but the task I have is to share with you some of the good work that we're able to do, largely because of the excellent relationship that we enjoy with the tourism sector in Scotland, and most especially with the British Hospitality Association and the Scottish Tourism Alliance. Indeed, I see, I was just saying to Willie MacLeod of the BHA earlier that I see more of Willie than I do of some of my own family members. And over the past year, of the 46 engagements that I've had as minister, a great many are with the BHA, with yourselves, your representatives, and your members. Because as someone who did own and run his business for 17 years, it seems to me it's absolutely essential that we have the closest possible relationship with industry. And we must always strive to improve on that, and that indeed is what we do. And also with Stephen Leckie, who heads up the Scottish Tourism Alliance in Scotland, who is here today, and who makes such a success of the Crieff Hydro and the Peebles Hydro and many other businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, tourism is the most important industry for Scotland. And I say that not perhaps because it generates the most revenue. I think probably the oil and gas sector pips the post there, making about £20 billion a year, which is not bad for Aberdonians. But the tourist industry covers the whole of Scotland. In many ways, all of us are ambassadors for tourism in Scotland, and tourism is everyone's business. And we recognise in the Scottish Government that the sector is, as the BHA asks us to recognise, an engine of growth and of job creation. And I'm very pleased to be able to add my support to the excellent work that the BHA is doing to try to improve the conditions where we can further see growth in the economy and jobs and investment in tourism, further increase the quality of the offering, as is happening in Scotland, thanks to your investment substantially. And I wanted to talk about some of the issues where I think we need a further competitive advantage in Scotland and throughout these islands. First of all, VAT. When I was in business in a small way, I was amazed at the enormous quantities of value-added tax that I collected free of charge for customs and excise, and was penalised were I to submit the returns late. It did always seem to me that VAT is actually the wrong three letters. It should be VET, not value-added tax, but value-eroded tax. But that breach of the Trades Description Act aside, we have long highlighted the disparity of VAT rates between the UK and many European countries, and indeed the majority of EU countries levy reduced rates of VAT on their hospitality and tourism sectors. The UK does not. In fact, 24 out of 28 EU countries enjoy vastly reduced tourism VAT, and therefore a competitive advantage over tourism businesses in other countries in a sector which is increasingly globally competitive. For example, Ireland reduced their VAT rate to 9% in 2011. At that time, they said that that was going to be a temporary measure. But so successful was it in helping to unleash growth and investment in the sector and returns in other forms of taxation by increased visitors that they have extended the VAT cut on the 31st December last year. It is being retained. Now, it's wrong of me to make promises that we would be able to cut VAT in the event of a yes vote in September in Scotland. However, independence would allow us the opportunity to set our own course, to chart our own course, and predominant amongst the criteria for deciding which course to navigate is the irreducible fact that we need to make our industry more competitive. One area where we recognise that there is a need for action and where we are proposing a reduction in taxation, which we believe would be of an enormous stimulus to the tourism sector, is on air passenger duty. If there is one thing, incidentally, about APD which is good, it was a comment made by Sir Richard Branson in the Scottish Business Awards in Edinburgh, of which you may be unaware, and it was with regard to the SNP government's proposal for a 50% reduction in APD within the first 4 years of the first Scottish independent government. And he said this, Sir Richard Branson said, "I think a 50% reduction in airline tax is maybe the first time I've ever agreed with Willie Walsh about anything." So the current APD rates aren't just about travel. They are also a deterrent on airlines to open new direct routes in this increasingly globally competitive world. A recent quote from the Chief Executive of the Airport Operators Association, Darren Kaplan, was this: "The UK risks becoming a global outlier on this issue as countries ranging from the Republic of Ireland to the Netherlands choose to abolish their respective air taxes." Now, I know that some action has been proposed to be introduced next year by the UK government in reducing from 4 to 2 the bandings in APD, and of course any measures are welcome. But it is difficult, I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, to see what could be more damaging to tourism in a world of global competition than taxing people for the temerity of wishing to travel here. We also, of course, recognise that direct flights are of increasing importance to Scotland and, of course, to many regions throughout these islands. The more direct flights, the more people are able to enjoy what these islands have to offer across the whole range of the country. We are very pleased that we have had success in winning more direct routes, for example, to Chicago, Philadelphia. The Qatar Airways flight from Doha to Edinburgh launched on the 28th of May. It's estimated by our National Tourism Agency that one route alone would be worth more than £80 million to the economy over the next 3 years. And that statistic, I think, illustrates, ladies and gentlemen, the potential benefits where Scotland and indeed the UK to be more bold in reducing the taxation issue. As well as cost issues, there are also issues over the perceived ease with which overseas visitors can visit our shores. 2 years ago, President Obama said this, that the US State Department would accelerate our ability to process visas by 40% in China, in Brazil, this year. He stressed we're not talking about 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but this year. That indeed is how he proceeded, and he's just signed a presidential memorandum giving his Homeland Security and Commerce Secretaries 4 months to come up with a plan to streamline the entry process and reduce waiting times, and ask departments within the 15 largest US airports, following steps taken by Dallas, Fort Worth and Chicago international airports, to cut waiting times at passport controls. Now, if one of the most security-conscious countries in the world, for very good reasons, can open their borders to tourism with such alacrity, it would be great to see the UK following suit with the tremendous opportunities that are offered from countries such as China and Brazil. I'm reminded that Winston Churchill used to append notes to his civil servants with a pin at the top and a little slip saying, "Action this day." It didn't say, "Action this decade," nor did it say, in respect of the much-needed extra London airport, "Action this century." So, I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that we can all get on with it. Looking at our competitors and what we can learn, the biennial World Economic Forum Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report assesses 140 economies based on the extent to which they're succeeding in tourism. And I think the very good news for all of us is that the UK was ranked number 5 out of 140, very near the top, beaten only by Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and Spain. And this is an improvement indeed. But whilst this is extremely welcome, recognising our cultural resources, the quality of offer, international fairs, and strong creative industries, there was, unfortunately, bad performance. And that in terms of price competitiveness, the UK ranked at 139 out of 140. What a terrific country. What a terrific country for tourism. What terrific attractions that we offer, manifold throughout all areas. But what a terrifically high burden of taxation we have to suffer in doing so. And what a terrific opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, if working together we can grasp the opportunity and the challenge. And I'd like to, in closing on the issue of cost, just pay tribute to the detailed, painstaking, thorough, and comprehensive lobbying and work that Ufi and her colleagues do in pursuing these matters, and to offer our assured and continuing support, irrespective of the outcome of the vote on the 18th September in Scotland. It is, of course, an important year. In Scotland, we hope that we will have the opportunity to decide how we run our own affairs on the basis that those people who live and work in a country are the best placed to run her affairs most effectively. That is up to the people to decide. And of course, people mention the issue of certainty or uncertainty. As all of us here who have run or run now businesses know, there is no thing as complete certainty. However, I can tell you that there are some things about which I can give you categoric assurances. Firstly, in the Scottish Government, we are committed to delivering the best possible conditions for economic growth and for the tourism sector in particular. Secondly, we remain implacably opposed to any suggestion of a bed tax anywhere in Scotland. And thirdly, I think we can guarantee the warmth of welcome to Scotland from visitors throughout the world. The most important market to Scotland is the rest of the UK. And indeed, our campaigning and marketing from our award-winning Visit Scotland agency are substantially directed to that UK market. The statistics show that the number of visitors from England for short breaks have increased, as have numbers taking other holidays in Scotland. That is welcome, and you will always continue to be made extremely welcome in Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to have the opportunity to engage in a discussion, questions with you, and I just want to finish by saying that in Scotland we are using the powers that we have under the existing devolution settlement to best effect, working closely with the sector, very closely indeed, working in areas such as business tourism, on accessible tourism for people who have a disability, an enormous opportunity to make them happy and provide them with the hospitality to which they're entitled, and to do so in a comprehensive way. In skills, in training, working with organisations such as Springboard, from whom you will be hearing later, working with the colleges and universities, above all working with industry, because tourism is, in many ways, our most important business. Let me conclude with another tale not from the courts, but from the Commons, the House of Commons, which is a true story, actually. And it's a story told by the late, great Donald Stewart, who was the MP for the Western Isles, who was first elected in 1970. And very early on, he took a friend, a visitor, to the Strangers' Bar in the House of Commons, where he decided he would buy each of them a whiskey, a dram. So he bought 2 glasses of whiskey, took them to the table, and noticed that in one of them there was a fly buzzing around. So he took them back to the barman at the House of Commons, Strangers' Bar, and said this. He said, "I don't mind so much that there's a fly in my dram, but I do mind that its feet can touch the bottom." So when you come to Scotland, Ufi and friends, we will make sure that you have a much more substantial dram to enjoy. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Fergus. Now, ladies and gentlemen, questions we ask you to think about. There are some young people around the room who have microphones. They've got white T-shirts on, so when we spot a question, I'll ask or direct them towards you. If you would please state your name and indeed the organisation that you represent, then we would like to hear your question. I've got one question over here to start with, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name's David Tarsh. I run my own business which does PR and strategic advice with a lot of clients in the tourism industry. Fergus, I was really impressed by your command of issues that matter to this industry. I have not heard a politician address topics that I think are so central, particularly VAT, particularly visas and access. It's clear that you are persuaded by the VAT case. It also seems to me that from the point of view of getting independence for Scotland, you're not quite over the line yet. If Scotland were to cut VAT for tourism, you would immediately have a great increase in the value proposition because there is no sea border from England to Scotland. You would naturally attract a lot of business. Lots of people work in the tourism industry in Scotland. Why not come out and make a promise that if Scotland were independent, it would definitely cut VAT for the tourism industry? You could then offer added employment and prosperity prospects for an enormous number of voters, rather than just sitting on the fence.
Well, David, you're a man after my own heart. And that's exactly what I would like to do. But I have explained that the pledge we have offered at the moment is to cut APD by 50% in the first 4 years. I think we will all know that in running the public finances, and we run our budget in Scotland, then you have to do so with prudence and you have to do what is possible. I think if you overpromise, there is a risk that you underdeliver and then you are punished by the electorate. If you forfeit the trust of people by overpromising, then you suffer a difficult fate. So I would like to do it. Of course, it will be up to the first Parliament of an independent Scotland to make the decision, not myself, but my party, the Scottish National Party, led by Alex Salmond, who, contrary to what Alistair Darling said yesterday, does not resemble Kim Jong-il. Yeah, it's a funny old campaign, but once common sense and a bit of a mature, sensible attitude prevails, then I think the case for lower taxes in Scotland would actually be positive for the rest of the UK following independence. And I say that for one very simple argument, and that is that contiguous tax regimes are, as David's question entails, good for competition. And therefore, if Scotland could give a lead, then that would be a shining example for our good friends down in HM Treasury. So we can't do everything we would like to do at the one time. But inside the tent, David, I'm with you.
Thank you. I have another question at the back, please. Thank you. Well, this is unfortunately probably going to be the last question because we need to make sure we keep our sessions to time. But again, if you could state your name and organisation and your question. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Denby. I'm a hotelier in the Lake District and the president of the Lakes Hospitality Association. The Scots are our best customers in the Lake District, mainly because they are the most free spending. And what you may not, you will know that, but what you may not know is that the Lake District, or Cumbria, used to be part of Scotland. Cumbria was excluded from the Domesday Book because it was considered at that time to be part of Scotland. My question to you is, when you succeed in getting independence this autumn, will you consider an application from Cumbria to join you?
What a terrific question. Let me answer it equally obliquely. This is another true story. The gentleman I mentioned, Donald Stewart, a fine man, was an SNP, a supporter of independence for Scotland, was once asked in the early 70s by a somewhat sort of insolent young reporter about the aim that we have of independence for Scotland. And the question was, Mr. Stewart, you're not seriously suggesting that the aim of your party is total separation, are you? And Donny puffed his pipe and said, no, that's not our aim at all. And the reporter said, well, what is your objective then? And Donny, puffing his pipe, said, total world domination. So let's start with Cumbria.